Okay, let's cover our wish list and expectations for the upcoming September 2025 balance patch. The title is all you need as an invitation to let me know in the comments what you would hope to see, and which of my thoughts you think is most likely and which change you would most like to see from the changes that are probably coming. But of course you'll have to wait till the end of the video to comment that. Although Games Workshop does 3 monthly balance patches now, after it found that 6 monthly balance patches other than points updates were not sufficient, it now does rules changes whenever it feels the need, which is why you have some rule changes that may get missed. So on the 20th of August, there was a points change to Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights and the Death Guard units. They were doing too well, too many units on the table. So while adding Votann and changing Votann and removing the Votann from the balance patch because all the balance patch things there were relating to the index Votann, they decided to also change points for those Knights and Death Guard. We are still waiting on Space Wolf Legends units. Maybe they will come out with the balance patch. Games Workshop prefers to do things in groups, like with the Imperial Knights points and changing Votann. Maybe they have to pay to access the rules document or change things on the app, so they try and get as many changes done in one go. Or it's just easier to group things together and say this is when we're doing the changes. In a balance patch, points will change, core rules can change, unit rules can change, and any kind of stats and abilities can change. We're expecting the next one on the 3rd of September, maybe the 10th of September, as that would match the previous balance patch trend. Each time there is a balance patch now, Games Workshop also releases 3 new detachments, not for every army, but sprinkled across the factions. I'll leave it until closer to the day to figure out what there could be. Yes, Genestealer Cult and Adepta Sororitas could do with another detachment. At the start of my June 2025 expectations video, I covered a lot of potential rules that could come with new detachments. But I think the Imperial Agents have all of their units in the Codex covered within detachments, but they could do with another good detachment. And I think Deathwatch are well served with all of the Space Marine detachments they can use again, and as an index only, not a codex, I'm not expecting a new detachment for them. They will have the Black Spear Task Force and like it. Alright, Adepta Sororitas. What are the changes and what am I hoping for the Battle Sisters? I don't think there'll be any changes to Miracle Dice, the way Miracle Dice function, generally the way we generate Miracle Dice. I think it's okay right now. But as a long-term Sisters player, as long-term as it can get, 2nd edition, in 10th edition, the Sisters don't feel very sistery. They feel more like Eldar. There were Miracle Dice matching Fate Dice at the start of the edition in the Eldar Index, and Sisters are very fragile. Toughness 3 and a 3+ save used to get us in a good spot behind Space Marines and Endurance, but we were slightly more numerous. Now the Eldar have a very similar save to us, and Aspect Warriors have an invulnerable save on par with our Elite Seraphim. There is a lot of similarity between Eldar and Sisters in rules terms, and that is not good. The playstyle for both is putting out a unit, knowing the unit will die, but getting some victory points from that unit before you replace it with another cheap unit. I don't think Eldar should play like that either. Sisters Flamers are not really better than Space Marine Flamers. Those Infernus Flamers are Strength 5 AP -1, so the Sisters Flamers are worse at Strength 5 AP 0. Melter Guns in this edition cannot damage vehicles unless you have a lot of good Miracle Dice or luck. Generally. We could do with a profile boost to be special again. A new detachment could help, but improving existing detachments would be my preference. What we're seeing now is Games Workshop giving a new detachment that is the same as an old detachment, but a little bit different. The Ordo Xenos detachment in Imperial Agents was like the Black Spear Task Force, but a little bit different. The new Salamanders detachment is a better version of Firestorm Assault, but for Salamanders chapter units only. I feel that the Adepta Sororitas still haven't recovered from all of the nerfs from December 2024. Bringers of Flame was so good on launch, and a big part of that was the increased strength on the weapons. +1 strength on all guns when fired within 12 inches. That is Melter Guns. That is Flamers. That is Bolter and Storm Bolter rapid fire range. It fixed a big problem that the Sisters had. A 6-inch range is not the same. It's much harder to get, and you can't get it when coming from reserves. Will that change back just because we now have 2 Space Marine detachments with +1 strength on all ranged weapons within 12 inches? I would like that, but I also doubt it. 9 inches would be appreciated. If Seraphim were a problem dropping in and getting the bonus strength, it stops the Seraphim power drop because you can't be at least 9 inches away and also within 9 inches at the same time. 9 inches doesn't automatically improve the strength of all melter guns and flamer weapons. But if there was a detachment boost, I believe it will be to the Penitent Host, which rarely sees play competitively. Repentia had a point drop in the last patch, but still don't see much tournament play. The least played detachment is Penitent Host, and they have the lowest win rate according to Goonhammer stats. The number here is the number of recorded games played with the detachment recently, the percentage is the win rate. 50% is ideal, 45% to 55% is the goal. Overall, the sisters are on a 49 to 51% win rate. That is the average between all of the detachments. So don't expect much in the balance patch. The Champions of Faith and the Hallowed Martyrs are all that are keeping the sisters in a reasonable win rate. Before the Champions of Faith was boosted to no longer require a Miracle Dice tax to use the detachment rule, the Champions of Faith were on similar play rates to the Penitent Host. So you see how boosting a detachment can massively increase the amount of people playing that detachment and the win rate. No change to units is required. The Hallowed Martyrs detachment works really well with our many characters, but in the recent knight-dominated meta of the past 2 months, the Hallowed Martyrs is really valuable. We have a stratagem to force knights to fight a throwaway mortifier that fights on death, or a Canoness with a 2+ invulnerable save, or any character when characters get back up, instead of a more valuable point-scoring unit. Don't expect even this win rate to last without support. And yet Games Workshop may do nothing for us. You can see from the stats that 3 of the detachments have low win rates and comparably very low player numbers. So to make the Penitent Host a bit better, the Repentia could come down in points again, or we could have a Penitent Host detachment boost, which is more likely required. Something like each of the different vows is not once per game. So you could use the same one over and over if you so wished, and you would get vows for all 5 battle rounds instead of just 3. The initial big boost in the points to the Triumph of St. Catherine is what hurt my Penitent list, and I still struggle with it. Those extra Miracle Dices of a 6 are valuable for making charges. Because if you're not in combat, you can't do much with the core of the Penitent Host. I play a lot of the Army of Faith. I like it, it's easy to use, and it has a great toolbox of parts that we require, like Lance, like an extra point of armor penetration, like being -1 to hit, potentially across your whole army if you string out enough Seraphim. If the Army of Faith gave you an extra Miracle Dice at the start of each player turn, as in the Codex, as in the Index, that would make the detachment far more favourable. Then the extra Miracle Dice detachment really does have the most Miracle Dice. Otherwise, the many Miracle Dice detachment can lose out to the Hallowed Martyrs, with their enhancements that also give you Miracle Dice and better Miracle Dice in the Chaplet of Sacrifice for rerolls and Saintly Example. And you can die, and return with Divine Intervention, and die again for even more Miracle Dice. A reversal on the detachment rule of the Bringers of Flame to go back to 12 inches would be appreciated, but I don't think Games Workshop will revert the change. To change the points of units, we know the Repentia could do with yet another points decrease. The Dog Martyr needs a points reduction. There is no world where she should be more expensive than a Dialogus, but also, for 5 points more, you get a Palatine, the bonk stick character of this edition. Like the Retributors, who are still a bit expensive and don't have the best written new rule, the Dog Martyr could have an improvement on her combat weapons or be able to join Novitiates and Repentia. That would be more thematic, at least, to have the character who guides sisters, and then, if you want enhancements to work on Repentia, you now have one character that can join them outside of the Penitent Host. The Dog Martyr lacks the 4+ invulnerable save of other Adepta Sororitas characters and compares really badly to the Genestealer Cult Locus for 45 points, who has Fight First and an extra attack on his profile and has a 4+ invulnerable save. Despite the change in the rule to the Retributors, they're still not widely taken. They could do with coming down in points a bit more, as they are overcosted. 105 points, 110 points, that would be better, because you can compare them to Dominions in terms of damage output, and see the Dominions are very close to them in one shooting phase, but with twice as many bodies to keep the Dominions in the fight longer, compared to 5 Retributors with only 1 Ablative Sister Superior before the heavy weapons start going down. Compare them to the tougher 115 points Immolator, oh that's the same points as the Retributors are currently, which has the equivalent of a Multi-Melter and a Heavy Bolter, or 2 Heavy Flamers and a Heavy Bolter, but the Flamer has longer range and the Multi-Melter is twin-linked. And importantly, it also splits a unit in half. Then you have more units to dispose of for Miracle Dice and trade away for victory points and to destroy other enemy units. We really still need a points reduction on the Exorcist. It is good, but that cost is painful. And with random damage on the missiles, unless you are putting Miracle Dice into it, it's not going to perform very well. We can't fix the number of shots. We can't use Miracle Dice on that particular roll, so you also get a random number of shots, which is either great or really, really bad. The Imagifier is another character that doesn't see play. They are far more expensive than a Hospitaller. Hospitallers operate better, especially with Sacrosancts coming up, as the Champions of Faith requires Sacrosancts, benefits greatly from having Sacrosancts, and the Sacrosancts benefit greatly from having a Hospitaller. The Imagifier doesn't see play and won't unless you reduce their points to at least match the Hospitaller. Then they get considered for, say, Battle Sister units. Battle Sisters with a 2+ save is much more difficult to get rid of. We won't see any points or rules for Celestian Insidiants. They were a leak, and although Games Workshop confirmed it as true, they are not due for release until 2026, the end of the Kill Team arc that starts this September with the Tomb World Kill Team release. For now, our only Celestians are Celestian Sacrosancts, still no Celestians with guns. The Sisters will need more help, and I hope Games Workshop realizes why. These average win rates are what we got with our best detachments and cheap Imperial Knight allies. Armigers or Canis Rex were common. As the points have gone up on Knights, the Knights will have to be dropped, and oh look at that, the Castigator costs more than an Armiger, so we drop some Sisters units, and however you look at it, we are worse off than we were before the Imperial Knight points went up, unless you were facing Imperial Knights on the table. For the Genestealer Cult, it's a similar story. But the Genestealer Cult are doing better than the Sisters. 54% win rate in tournaments, and once you take out the top performing few players, 52%. At its height in the last 2 months, the Host of Ascension has reached 60% win rate, so if Genestealer Cult penalties are coming, it is for the Host of Ascension detachment, or units that are commonly taken in the Host of Ascension armies. But I don't think the Genestealer Cult needs any points increases. There were a lot of Death Guard, Imperial and Chaos Knight armies because of their low points per model. Genestealer Cult does really well against them. We can outscore the small number of Knights and we can bring them down, especially with the Host of Ascension, which is what we see most in tournaments. That is the detachment I have been taking to tournaments recently. There is lethal hits and sustained hits when coming from reserve and combining the Biophagus with the detachment rule, or the detachment rule and a chink in their armor, or the Benefactus and the detachment rule. Any of them can be on a 5+ with the primed and readied stratagem. Against Death Guard armies, we had the bodies to outdo the zombies, the Poxwalkers, and could avoid most of the shooting that the Death Guard had with the Host of Ascension rules. There was a stratagem to take some fire and then return underground so that you're not getting wiped out by subsequent units. It doesn't matter if the Death Guard Plague Marine Infantry paint you with their army rule, you could then hide for a turn until it goes away. And other armies within the meta were bringing lots of las cannons and anti-tank and anti-elite guns. That was to take down the Knights and the Death Guard. They had a really bad time against a horde of 1 wound models. Genestealer Cult countered the meta. Genestealer Cult were the counter to the meta. While what counters the Host of Ascension is fast-moving, multi-attack combat armies. Tyranid Genestealers, Blood Angels, World Eaters, the Emperor's Children. But they had not been coming out to play at tournaments because they can't handle Knights or Death Guard very well. It was like we were playing rock, paper, scissors without any scissors in the game. And we are the paper. After the Knights and the Death Guard points reduction, those armies will appear fewer times at tournaments. They will be easier to beat, slightly easier to beat at tournaments, and the Genestealer Cult win rate will go down as assorted flavors of Marines come at us. And as other armies stop packing lots of las cannons and go for a more measured, average-out approach. Plasma cannons can still do pretty well against Knights, and also do a lot better against Genestealer Cult. But Games Workshop may not take that into account. Not many people play Genestealer Cult, so the chances of a Genestealer Cult player being part of the balance talks are low. Games Workshop has previously hit 20 neophytes, as 20 costs more than 2 times 10 neophytes, and 20 neophytes is a big part of the Host of Ascension. A 2,000 point army will usually have at least 2 big blocks. So Games Workshop could add even more points to the Benefactus, as that is a character seen a lot in Host of Ascension that isn't seen elsewhere. The Primus is part of the Xenocreed detachment, the Biofagus is the key character in the Biosanctic Broodsurge, so the Benefactus is an obvious target. The enhancements could be targeted, as a chink in their armor is a discount Benefactus. The other option is to make Primed and Readied 2 command points. Increasing the Resurgence cost on some units wouldn't lower the Host of Ascension's win rate without also lowering every other detachment win rate, and arguably the Host of Ascension would be hurt the least, as it is the initial strike with the characters that causes a lot of damage, not so much bringing back 20 neophytes with no leader. What you often bring back is lots of small units, 5 Acolytes, 5 Genestealers, but you do that in all of the other detachments. Another way to upset all of the Genestealer Cult players is to increase the points on the Ridge Runners. They are a staple in all Genestealer Cult lists in all detachments. The bonus armor penetration that lasts until the end of the turn, not just the end of the shooting phase, is the key to causing damage. What I would like to see is a fix to the Genestealer Cult detachments. It has been 9 months with the current Cult Ambush, and I think it is working well. There is no randomness on success, player choice matters as you get to choose when and where to use your resurgence points. That is good. So fix the stratagems in each detachment to have value. Moving a token around that I don't need to use isn't valuable. Oh, I can shift this Cult Ambush marker so it's not removed, but now I can only bring Pure Strain Genestealers from it. Or I can just have the token be removed and deep strike the Genestealers. I know I can't Rapid Ingress, but if I really wanted to Rapid Ingress, and I wanted that Rapid Ingress unit to be those Genestealers, and I wanted them to Rapid Ingress in that exact spot, that's the only time I'm going to be using this stratagem. The Nexus lets us move a Cult Ambush marker. The Icon Ward lets us protect a Cult Ambush marker. We have characters that already do this. Give us the 6th stratagem. Downtrodden Rise is the worst offender. Downtrodden Rise is pointless. You pay 2 command points to bring on a unit from the board edge at least 9 inches from the enemy if there are no Cult Ambush markers in your army. Or I can not pay 2 command points and use Deep Strike to set up the unit anywhere on the table, not within 9 inches of the enemy. In the overall stats from Goonhammer, most people are playing the Host of Ascension, and that has fluctuated between 40 and 60% win rate. Games Workshop doesn't care so much about the average, just what the top players can do. 5 tournaments have been won by the Host of Ascension. So don't look at this 52% win rate and think that'll be fine. Tournament wins and high placings are what matters. If the Dark Eldar are doing really badly overall with a 44% win rate, but one person is absolutely crushing it in tournaments, the Dark Eldar will see points increases. Because there has been, I think, 1 tournament win with an Outlander Claw detachment, and otherwise nothing, that may make you feel a bit better about the final day and Outlander Claw percentage win rate. They're doing well, but not win event well. And you can see that there are 2 detachments that don't get much play, the Brood Brothers Auxilia and the Xenocreed. But the Brood Brothers Auxilia has a terrible win rate. They need a boost to their detachment rule. For example, if that +1 to hit that the Astra Militarum units provide lasted in the combat phase as well, similar to how the Ridge Runner works, then we would see a great boost to the Genestealer Cult as a whole. You're not trying to make the bad at shooting Genestealer Cult units a little bit better at shooting. You have something that works with the army, and the Genestealer Cult has a lot of combat units. Now Aberrants can benefit. Now Acolytes can benefit. We see Aberrants and Acolytes and Metamorphs in Final Day detachment armies. You could have the same thing with the Brood Brothers Auxilia. Improving the Brood Brothers Auxilia Doesn't really mess with the Genestealer Cult, but would give a more viable detachment of people who buy outside the faction. Eh? Games Workshop? Eh? More money to be made? Or just forget about the Games Workshop stuff. You can buy things through affiliates and it will be cheaper. You get really good discounts and a tiny amount of that money comes to me. That's what keeps this channel going. We all exist under capitalism, and while you can support me directly, I also like it when you get cheaper Wargames models and paints and stuff from the deal. Links are in the description. As an option to tweak many of these detachments, we have a dodge stratagem in those detachments. In the Shadow of Iron to move a Cult Ambush marker around, in the detachment with the fewest units with Cult Ambush, and when Cult Ambush does not need a Cult Ambush marker anymore as it is Deep Strike, swap it out for something better. Perhaps something that boosts the Astra Militarum units. For 1 command point, do the detachment rule in reverse. Have a Genestealer Cult unit shoot an enemy unit, and then an Astra Militarum unit that shoots that same one gets +1 to hit. That's a very mild ability for 1 command point, but it would really help the Brood Brothers Auxilia, as now we can have Rogel Dawns and Lehman Russes hitting on a 3+. We don't have access to orders, apart from with the Kazakin. This in part makes up for it. In Xenocreed, the Downtrodden Rise being 2 command points to have a unit in Cult Ambush return to the battle if all the Cult Ambush markers was removed. We don't need that, we have Deep Strike, so for 2 command points, give us the Reinforcement Stratagem. Bring an Acolyte, Neophyte or Metamorph unit back for command points instead of Resurgence points. This is the Horde detachment. Give us more ways to be a Horde. Have it once per game, like similar stratagems. Some of the characters need fixing, but after 9 months of balance patches since Cult Ambush had its biggest overhaul, I'm not hopeful. The Nexus is rather rarely played. Moving Cult Ambush blips is pointless. And if their other ability gave you a command point at the start of the turn to use on whatever you wanted, instead of having no combat abilities, no use besides reducing the command points, so they're a character that gets dragged along for the use of 1 or 2 stratagems, but if they were just at the back generating command points, they may see more play. We know the Benefactor's invulnerable save is only for the model, and it goes from a 5+ to a 4+. It's not for the unit, that is a dud ability. The Icon Ward is taken for the 5+ Feel No Pain, especially on blocks of 20 Neophytes, but their ability to protect a blip is not very useful under the current Cult Ambush, almost like the Codex units were written to operate under a totally different system and rule. Perhaps if the Benefactors did give the unit an invulnerable save once per game, and also went up in points a lot, that would make the character function and also be a penalty to the Host of Ascension, which mainly cared about the lethal hits part of his rule. You know, the Genestealer Cult Magos could use that ability. Your unit gets an invulnerable save, be a purely defensive character, or it could have a 10 points reduction. Because if you wanted defense, even in Xenocreed, which calls out the Magos as a key unit, you pick the Icon Ward instead. There have been several good changes to the Genestealer Cult recently. I hope they stick around, but it also means we're probably due some penalties. For a 5 point decrease for a unit of 5 and going down a resurgence point, a squad of 5 Atalan Jackals have become a staple in so many Genestealer Cult lists in all the detachments. I still prefer pure strains for the same cost, but Jackals are so good at toughness 4, 2 wounds, with stealth, with some shooting capabilities, a lot of speed, scouting to block enemies, and mortal wound shenanigans. They were very useful against knights. I like 5 pure strains at 2 resurgence points, so I prefer to bring back 5 Genestealers instead of 5 Acolytes now. But it's battlefield situation dependent. I hope to keep both of these changes from the previous balance patch. Let's go further down the table to the Imperial Agents. Overall, they're on about a 40% win rate. The Imperial Agents need help. They feel like a Crusade book option instead of an army. There is no army rule aside from being able to ally into other armies. The Knights have that and more. If they got an army rule, something like +1 to wound against a chosen enemy character, a bit like Oath of Moment, or reroll wound rolls against a chosen character unit. That would represent a focus on killing the enemy heretical leaders. It could be limited to one enemy character unit per battle round. Then Imperial Agent Deathwatch veterans would enjoy full rerolls to hit and full rerolls to wound if that enemy was an alien character. That is on par with Sternguard, who have that same benefit from the Oath of Moment. Please give the Imperial Agent something. This army should be extra good at assassination. They have the assassins. But there is an appalling win rate with the assassination detachment, the Veiled Blade Elimination Force. I've explored why these detachments are so bad. And 50% win rate with Demon Hunter's detachment looks good until you see that 2 games were played. It is almost all Imperialis fleet. A new detachment that worked with a new army rule could be cool. Any boost to them would be of value. But it looks like Imperial Agents was always intended to be a pile of allies wrapped up in a book. The Deathwatch also need more help. 44% win rate, roughly. It's not good. It's mostly with the Black Spear task force, but I am in with the Gladius players, because I generally prefer the flexibility to advance and charge, fall back and shoot and charge, and advance and shoot as needed, more than lethal hits but only on the kill teams. And if I want to do deep strike shenanigans, I'll play the Genestealer Cult. Despite potentially being able to take out knights with 10 veterans or an Indomitor kill team, we really haven't enjoyed the lack of aliens at the top of the meta. Poxwalker hordes and Chaos Knights are not our jam. So the Deathwatch may need a boost, just a nicer meta, and also a little points reduction on several less taken kill teams, like the Fortis kill team and the Spectrus kill team. That would be appreciated, just for casual games if nothing else. And a points drop on the Deathwatch veterans before the new Tomb World kill team comes out, that may be there to sell the remaining boxes of veterans. The new unit and rules for them are expected towards the end of September. Deathwatch do worse than Space Marines as we don't have access to several really good units. Devastator Marines and Scouts and any kind of Terminators besides our own. For Space Marines generally, Ultramarines are still the favourite chapter for the better Oath of Moment. Detachments like the Forged Fathers Seekers as Salamanders only could be Games Workshop's way of fixing that, so that Ultramarines doesn't become the default generic Marines. It's here is a better version of a Codex detachment, but only one chapter can use it. Maybe Devastator Marines will be allowed for Space Wolves in the balance patch. Because there's no Long Fangs unit in the Codex, and allowing Devastators again would be an easy way to make up for the absence. The Legends document may be updated at the same time for the World Eaters, the Thousand Sons, and the Space Wolves, but Space Wolves are especially waiting on Long Fangs and Wolf Scouts. They're basic units, never mind the Hounds of Morkai. What is coming may be a calm balance patch with a few points tweaks, or it could be shocking and game-shattering. The rules may be about to get wacky, as we are less than a year from 11th edition, and if 10th edition is going to be compatible with 11th edition, Games Workshop will begin to mold 10th edition to try out rules for next edition. Just like with the previous editions, a lot of those rules will come from Horus Heresy and Age of Sigmar. Let's keep this going and look at the rules that Age of Sigmar could contribute to 11th edition of 40k. My darlings and viewers, I hope we have a great day balancing 40k.